I want to touch back real quick on the polar bears. I mean, I know what the difference between a polar bear and a grizzly or brown bear is, but what's the difference in the actual bear viewing? Like, I know when I was in Alaska, at McNeil, everything I did was like by foot. I guess bears can be aggressive, but it seems as though their behavior was very predictable. But like, what's the difference between like your brown bear viewing and then like your polar bear viewing?
Well, so the brown bear viewing, like you said, it's very here in Alaska anyway. And of course, this is something don't try what we do in Alaska and Yellowstone. We're just for all the viewers. Not all bears are created equal, and the ones we have here in the coastal regions of Alaska are generally. I don't necessarily think of them as aggressive, but I think of them as more tolerant.
Mm.
So, like bears, it's all about how tolerant they are, and it has to do with their experience with humans. It has to do with how much food is available. Here on the coast in Alaska, the lunch swims right to them. Like they're not having to defend a home range or chase down ground squirrels or what. With polar bears, there's less working knowledge, we'll call it, on the ground polar bear experiences, which is what we go to Churchill, Manitoba, which is it's right on Hudson Bay, and we drive around the back roads in like Toyota 4Runners and SUVs, and then back in the vehicle.
Right.
You're standing next to the vehicle, you get out, you take your pictures, the bear starts walking towards you. At a certain point, I, as the guide, determine, you know what, we just don't want to be in this situation. And which one just don't want to be in. But you got to spot good enough to know when to just get back in the truck, basically.
Yeah.
And so I don't necessarily think they're very curious. And when we watch bears here in Alaska during the summer, whether they're fishing or grazing, we are seeing these bears. They are business oriented at this point, where they're doing their feeding for the year. Whereas you go see polar bears in Churchill, and they're bored out of their minds.
Oh,
like they've been waiting since July, and they're walking around. They're like, and even if it's 32 degrees, even if it's freezing in Churchill, that's still too warm for a polar bear. Like these polar bears want it like 20, 30 below. Like at 30 above, it's like they're wearing their park in the summertime to them, because they are so just absolute cold that once the temperature starts to drop, you see them. Oh, they're more active. They start walking around. They might start playing because they're bored. People, you read in these books, and people tell you even that say, oh, the polar bears that spar near Churchill, they're trying to size each other up so that when they get out on the ice for mating season, they know who not to mess with. But like I'll tell you, from my understanding of how bears think, that's a byproduct, not a cause. Like those bears are bored, and they see the same bears year after year after year, and they get to the point where they're like, oh, it's so and so, and they have a not necessarily a bond, but they have a trust relationship with that other bear, that allows them to maybe let their guard down a little bit and say, okay, let's wrestle, basically. And it's fun to watch. It's these bears interacting. And I don't know, the first time people see polar bears, it blows their mind, because it's something you've seen on TV, but nothing compares you to being, on the edge of a freezing ocean with, blowing north wind, and then I'll be damned if here doesn't come a polar bear just like it's supposed to. And and everybody reacts different. I've had people break down and cry. I've had people get scared. I've had people, and everything in between. Basically, everybody's reacting to these things differently. But when it comes to like conservation, it just kind of speaks to how everybody has their own reasons why something should be conserved. And so, like for me, I love these things, but I'm also deriving economic benefit from them. So, like, I have multiple reasons to not just love. I'm not necessarily just doing this for the conservation projects for the love of the bears. In some ways, I'm also fighting for my own livelihood, economic opportunities. I got a mortgage to pay.
Yeah, seriously. I have a